You are listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, and instead of my mate James Jones this week, I'm delighted to say that joining me as my co-host is legendary West Ham striker Tony Cottee, friend of the show. Tony, it's absolutely brilliant having you on the podcast again. Thanks so much for giving us your time. Jonesy, he's jetted off to Canada. He's working in Montreal, and I feel like you're a fairly apt and fitting replacement.
Thank you, Will. I think I've got to be honest, I'd rather be in Canada, but
Well, yeah.
I'm only joking, mate. No, it's a pleasure to be back on. We haven't spoken for a while, so it's great to be back with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, James is currently in Montreal trying to figure out how to say 2 beers, please, in French. And his English isn't that great, so I don't think his French is particularly better. But Tony, look, it's just a great time to have you joining us, really. Obviously, went to Manchester City last week during the week, and you know, sort of the result everyone was expecting, really. Obviously, you like to go into any game thinking you've got a chance there in imperious form. We didn't disgrace ourselves, really, and if anything, perhaps the scoreline might have done them a favour, but obviously an excellent result against Manchester United on Sunday with the 1-0 win at London Stadium, all but confirming West Ham's safety, really. So, you know, sort of some sections of the fans it's been pretty bleak for, and there's been a lot of grumblings and moanings this season. It's been an odd one, but great result against Man United. Basically safe, and we can concentrate on Europe, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, firstly, with the Man City game, I thought we'd done well. You know, bearing in mind we had 3 players last-minute dropouts when there's illness in the camp or whatever, so they tell us.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. So, I thought we'd done well. First half, we kept City at bay, didn't we? And I think the problem would always, not just for us, but for any team you go to the Etihad, is scoring goals. And, you know, it's very, very difficult to score against City. Couple of half chances, nothing more than that. And then, of course, once they got their first goal, you just thought, oh, here we go. And, you know, it's hard to chase against Man City because, of course, if you push forward and then you lose the ball and then they go down the other end, then obviously counter-attack and get the second and third goals that they got in the end. So no surprise that we got beat, really. But I think, you know, it was a case of just don't get walloped. And I think when you're down the bottom of the league, you know, goal difference can always be crucial. And that, you know, to be fair, goal difference is really good. And so to come out the game, you know, 3-0, I think it was what it was, really. But it put the pressure on a little bit for the Man United game on Sunday. I went to the game. I must admit, I thoroughly enjoyed it. First 20 minutes, I felt United played all right and looked a bit sort of threatening on the counter-attack type of thing. But, you know, in the main, without us creating too much, I felt we controlled the game. And, you know, once you got into the second half, you just felt that there was only going to be one winner, really. You know, once the goal had gone in, you're going 1-0 at half-time. I just felt it was going to be our day. I really did. And, you know, it's a fantastic 3 points, as you say. Doesn't guarantee safety. We know that. And if results go against us, in other words, teams start to win behind us and pick up points, we will get dragged back into it. But, you know, we've got destiny well in our own hands. We've got game at Brentford coming up, game at Leeds coming, home to Leeds. And then you've got the game at Leicester, which, you know, that might be a make or break game for Leicester. So, you know, difficult games, all with teams, apart from Brentford, 2 teams below us. Yeah, I think fairly confident of us, as I always have been. I would add, Will, you know, I'm not being one of these doom mongers who felt we was going to get relegated. I always felt we was going to stay up.
Yeah, me too. I'll be honest. I've been exactly the same. You know, listeners to the podcast will vouch for me there. I've never, you know, I haven't always said it's been pretty, but I've always sort of felt we'd do enough. And, you know, just because of some of the quality of the teams below us as well. And I think it's if Newcastle and Liverpool win this weekend, so Newcastle go to Leeds, and Liverpool, obviously, as you mentioned there, they go to Leicester. If they both win, we are technically safe. So it's going to take an awful lot from struggling teams to overcome West Ham, particularly that goal difference, like you say. So obviously worth getting the points on the board, but it could be all over this weekend. Look, before we go into those games in a little bit more detail, Tony, sort of, you know, what you've been up to. I've obviously been a couple of months or whatever since we spoke. Yeah, how's things? What you've been up to? Keeping yourself busy?
Yeah, all good. Well, I've been keeping myself busy. I had a nice little break in Thailand in March, a couple of weeks holiday, which was lovely with friends. Enjoyed that.
Phuket, was it?
No, went to Bangkok, went to Krabi, went to Koh Lanta, which was really nice. So, yeah, it was a bit of everything, a bit of sort of hustle bustle and then a little bit sunbathing and that. But no, it's a really nice part of the world. I hadn't been there since I went with Everton back in the late 80s, 89, 90. I think I went to Bangkok with Everton, and even then it was only to Bangkok, so it wasn't sunbathing. But I had a great time, and it's been ducking and diving a little bit, and I do a little bit of work for Leicester. I was saying to you off air, I was at the Fulham Leicester game yesterday, and they Leicester looked like they were in big trouble. Everton had a great win against Brighton, which has given them a chance. But it's not been a nice season for me, Will. My mate keeps winding me up saying, and comes West Ham, Everton, Leicester. There's the 3 of your teams are in the bottom 6 at the moment, which is it's not been good from that point of view. But I've enjoyed the season as always. There's always so much going on in the Premier League.
Yeah, no, of course. So let's say, obviously, we've spoken sort of semi-regularly, but the last time we spoke sort of in a professional capacity, it was around the PAI Capital potential takeover that you were involved in. We spoke about that. You were kind enough to give us an interview about that when the sort of news first came out and it was being announced. What do you sort of, can you sort of fill us in? It's good when a bit quiet, obviously, after it didn't come to fruition. What can you tell us about that situation and that time and what's happened since?
Yeah, it was disappointing, Will. I mean, obviously, as you know, I put my sort of back in behind the PAI boys. There was really good boys, a lot of good people involved, a lot of good plans for the club, to take the club on, make it bigger and better, and, do everything really that the club needs. And, I was a big part of that. And, I wanted to be involved with the fans because that's where I sort of saw my role really, certainly as a link between the board and the fans. I don't think there is any link at the moment, and there should be, because there's still a lot of things as we speak that the fans are, disgruntled about, and fans should have a say. You should be able to not talk to the chairman, because I think that, in any business you can't have a, right. We all know that, but you should have a buffer. You should have someone where you can talk to them or talk as a collective, have representatives, go and talk to someone like myself, and then I can then report back to the board. It's, something, regardless of whether it was PAI or whoever it might be going forward, it's something I'd love to do. And, because I've always looked at myself as a fan, and, I want what's best for the football club. And that's, that's always been my interest. Of course, I've backed PAI. Unfortunately, when I got involved, although I was aware of Daniel Kretinsky, I didn't realise that the deal was going to be done. And obviously, that's David Bower's prerogative. He can deal with whoever he wants and, make arrangements with whoever he wants. So I think it'd be very interesting to see what happens now. But I mean, obviously the focus as a football club has been fully on staying in the Premier League. And, if that happens, which it should do, then I think we might see some movement in the summer in terms of what happens off the field. I haven't got any inside information I can share with you, Will. I'd love to sit here and say that I know this is going to happen, that's going to happen, but I don't know. I can only sort of speculate, like we all can really. And, I think ultimately there will be some movement. David Sullivan can obviously sell the club now without paying any penalties to the government. Matters have obviously been complicated by the sad loss of David Gold as well, so there's been a lot going on off the field as well as on the field. So I think it's an interesting time for the club. I really do. I think, be interested to see what happens in terms of potential takeovers. I don't know whether there will be one, but potentially there could be. And then, of course, on the field as well, there's a lot of things going to happen in the summer. We've got the situation with Deck. We've got a lot of aging players, senior players coming towards the end of their career. And more importantly, we've got a fantastic youth team that's just won the Youth Cup. So,
what an achievement.
So, there's a lot going to be going on, I think, over the next sort of few months, and it'd be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, no, quite. I mean, so as every time I speak to you, we obviously appreciated your honesty and frankness at the time. And I think what shone through then, and still does now, obviously, I follow you on Instagram, and it's not, I see you in the away ends, and you I know you go to a lot of the home games as well, and mixing in with the fans. And you've always said it to me and to anyone really, that first and foremost, you were a West Ham supporter. You were lucky enough to play for the club, score all the goals that you did. And now that stopped, you're still a West Ham supporter. Everyone can see that coming off you. So you sort of interesting mention there, just before we move on and talk sort of about the club and the recent performances and looking ahead to what's going to be an exciting couple of weeks, hopefully. Well, you mentioned about looking forward. Is that something you still like to be involved in the club one day in some capacity? Could you sort of see yourself doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I'd love to. I mean, I think I've got to accept that as things stand at the moment, there's no room for me at the club.
Cool. You were aware of that though, weren't you? When
absolutely,
come up.
I've had my issues with the board, and
Yep.
it is, and that's sort of been on and off over the last 13 years now since the current board's been in place. So I know where I stand with it, and it's quite obvious their feelings towards me. So I've got no problem with that, but if and when it changes, then, hopefully there might be an opportunity for me to get back involved, Will. But I've always said it's not about me. It's about what's best for the club. If it's best for the club for me to be involved, then get me involved. It seems stupid not to get me involved. But, if whoever's in charge feels that there's no room for me or no place for me, got no problem with that. I'll just continue what I'm doing, Will. I've got my season ticket, which I go to all the games. I'm looking forward to going to the game on Thursday. I'll go to the Leeds game, the last home league game. So, I've thoroughly enjoyed being a season ticket holder this year, and I'm going to the Brentford game on Sunday. I'm going to Holland for the semi-final, and I booked my flights for Prague last October. That's how confident I was.
Yeah.
It's great. To be a fan, then I've really, really enjoyed it. But if the club ever wanted me to do something more, then of course I would do that. The people always say, "Would you manage West Ham?" I said, "Well, it's not going to happen in a million years." But if they rang it, temporary manager tomorrow, can you do it? Of course, I'd walk to the London Stadium to do that. And that's how much it means to me, the club. And I think that's not just me speaking. That'd be yourself. That'd be all the fans around the world. You have your personal life where you love someone in the personal life, and you have your professional life. And I've always loved West Ham. I can't change that, and I don't want to change that.
So then, Tony, you're at the game on Sunday. It was just brilliant, was it? It was one of those games I fancied before. I figured we might get a point. Manchester United seemed to be struggling a bit towards the end of the season. Erik ten Hag has talked after the game about fatigue and all that sort of thing. And they haven't been great, but as I always say, they've got some absolutely world-class talent in that side. And you've still got to beat what's in front of you. West Ham have been struggling too. And it really felt like one of those results, and Moyes' side have done it a few times this season, where we needed one and he's plucked one out of the bag.
Yeah, I think there's been quite a few occasions, hasn't there, where people talking about how this could be David Moyes' last game and it's a must-win game and we need to get 3 points in it. But we've heard it all so much this season, purely because of where West Ham have been in terms of the position in the league. But it's quite interesting because I said earlier I'm a season ticket. When I get into the lounge where I watch the games from and invariably you get asked about 3 or 4 times, what's the score going to be today? As if I've got this crystal ball and I know football. Predictions are my strong point as well, I might add. But I must admit, going into the game on Sunday against United, I was very confident that we wouldn't get beat. I didn't necessarily expect us to win the game, but I felt we could get a point. And I knew that a point would be a really good point because of the goal difference that we've spoken about already, So to go and get the 3 points was a fantastic result for the lads. And I think it's been coming over the last few weeks. We haven't always got the results, but even the Newcastle game, I came in at half-time, the Newcastle game, and I was really pleased with how we played. We was on the front foot. We took the game to Newcastle. We conceded 2 stupid goals and was losing 2-1 at half-time. But that first half, it was one of those where you sit at half-time thinking, we'd actually played quite well here, and it wasn't like what we'd seen previous to that game. So I think that was almost like the start of the recovery. And then we've had some games since then. We had some important results. What was the game we played? I'm trying to think the game we played where we did. I know the Bournemouth game was a great result. There was one game we played, the 1-0 victory away from home, and it was a poor.
Well,
I can't remember.
Was it Fulham?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, Fulham.
Thanks, mate. You've probably got the stats in front of you where wild, and that's why I floundered. But the Fulham game, which I did watch, and it was a dreadful game, but the result was fantastic. And
Southampton win as well. Yeah, did the same, wasn't it?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, I mean Southampton. They looked doomed to me that day. That was really, really poor. The worst team I've seen up Upton Park. I'd love to say it was Upton Park, London Stadium. Reminiscing, obviously. They're the worst team I've seen at West Ham this year, Southampton. But yeah, I just feel that there's been the green shoots of recovery have been sort of popping up. And when you're down the bottom of the table, it's tough. I've been there as a player. I've been there as a fan, and we know how difficult it is. And you seem to get decisions go against you. And even at the end of the first half, how on earth that is not handball?
Well, I was going to ask you about that next. Yeah,
I just don't get what the video referees are looking at. Well, I've always been very black and white with handball. I've said it as a player from the moment I started playing football. To me, handball is handball. I don't care whether you meant it, didn't mean it, put your arm up, put your arm down. I don't care. If it hits your hand, it's handball. Now, I know people then will then say, well, of course, you get people smashing the ball at someone from 2 yards away, hitting them on the hand. And perhaps that's where you could maybe make a judgment as whether it was intentional or not. I understand that. But the incident we're talking about, I think it was Ben Rama, wasn't it, Benny, who tried to...
onto Lindelof it was.
And Lindelof, he's got his hand there, and he actually stops the ball with his hand. When they then turn around and say, oh, he didn't mean to do that, I think a lot of the handballs that I look at, they're actually missing the point. And the point would be that if he didn't handball it, the ball would have gone behind him. And if it goes behind him, West Ham potentially could have scored a goal. I know there wasn't a West Ham forward there, but potentially there could have been. Yeah. So when they say, was it deliberate? Was it not deliberate? Was his hand in here? Was it... All that is complete rubbish. Technically, if you handle the ball, it is a penalty, because what you're doing, if you handle it, as happened, you stop the ball going behind you. And, I think he knew what he was doing, Lindelof. He sort of give it one of them. And then when you handle it, you then put your hands up and say, oh, I didn't mean to do it, and the referee's going to let you off. The rules need clarifying. I think it drives everyone insane with what's going on with the VAR at the moment. And I've also got to say, I do think that West Ham have been given a bad hand with VAR.
Yes.
So many decisions. Even going back, was it the Chelsea one early in the season? They'd just been...
Maxwell Cornet, yeah.
Exactly, I know.
Got a Thiago handball at Liverpool the other day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And you had, obviously, we got the one against Arsenal with Mikel Antonio, handballs it there. Very, very similar to the Lindelof thing. I think, I'm not one of them, but you go on social media and you'll hear fans and words. I don't like it to see it, because I don't obviously think that's true, but people start talking about corruption and bias towards the Big Six and all that sort of stuff. No, and obviously it's not as deep as that.
I can say at this point that in terms of corruption, England is one of the most least corrupted countries in the world. I think there's a real degree of honesty from the players. I know they roll around a little bit, and I get all that, but I think in terms of results and how games pan out, you don't get an easy game in the Premier League. You watch the Liga sometimes, and the top of the league play the bottom, and they beat 8-0 or something stupid on that, and you know the result before you've even kicked off. Yeah. I'm not saying that that's corrupted. What I'm saying is there's not the competitiveness and the difficulty in winning points that there is in the Premier League. That's it's not technically the best in the league, you could argue, but in terms of excitement, I mean, look at the 3 games yesterday, 21 goals in 3 games. Yeah. There's a lot of going in, but, you see teams giving a real account of themselves, and come the end of the season, there will be a team that's playing, I don't know, Arsenal or Man City or whatever, the mid-table or whatever, and they will still try it. They will still give it their all. So, I don't think anyone should suggest that there's corruption or there's things going on that shouldn't be going on. I don't think that's the case. I just, for whatever reason, I don't think they've got this VAR right. I'm a big fan of VAR. I think it's a good thing for the game, but I don't like there's too many grey areas which causes problems, and there's also the time it takes to make decisions. I've been sitting there at the London Stadium a couple of times this season, and it's gone 2-3 minutes, or even coming up 4 minutes to make a decision. And you're just baffled by how long it takes and that. So I think things need to be corrected in terms of VAR. But don't
you find as well with that? There's a lot of the time, it's the law that needs having a look at, rather, because you mentioned the handball law then. If the laws are confusing, it don't matter how many cameras you've got or how many times you look at it. Like you say, that I find, if you just did a straw poll of most football fans, right, the Lindelof one, if you took away the strips and it wasn't obvious who each player played for, and you just chose a normal football fan, those 2 random players, computer generated or whatever, so you couldn't tell whether they were United, West Ham, whatever, and just said, right, this is what happens. Midfielder X kicks it against defender Y's hand there. Defender Y makes action. For the good of football, do you think that should be handball and a penalty? Most football fans go, yeah, of course.
I agree.
Don't they? And I do.
You're right. It's the rules, and then refereeing is a tough job anyway. The VAR, I'm sure it's a tough job. You're sitting in stock, you're under pressure. You've got to. I get all that. I understand all that. But if you can do what you've said, which is to simplify the rules, it makes it easier for them all to make a decision. When you, as I say, when you try to work out, all these things going on, and they must the VAR. They must be their heads spinning, and then they're looking at it, and they're not looking at whether it was handball or not. They're thinking about the 2 or 3 rules that apply before you even think about that. And then all of a sudden, 30 seconds has gone or minutes gone, and you're under pressure to make these decisions. But to not even, I don't even think they looked here, did they? The one we're talking about, it felt like the ball went up down the other end. The referee blew half-time whistle, and they hadn't even looked at it.
I think they were looking at it sort of while play was going on. But I spoke to former Premier League referee Mark Halsey after the game. Yeah. He said, I just don't understand. He said, I don't understand. It's a clear and obvious error. It hits all the criteria. The referee, to be fair to him, the on-field ref, would have struggled to see it from where he was. So that's what the VAR's there for. And he was absolutely baffled. Look, Tony, I don't want to get too bogged down on that. I was going to ask you about it anyway. I think the fact it's not, was a travesty. And there is that, I have that sense. That's why I was so pro-VAR. Because I did feel a lot of 50-50s you'd always get against the bigger teams. But I want to talk to you about Said Benrahma. He scored the opening goal 27 minutes in. And obviously the focus, sort of rightfully so afterwards, was on the fact it was a howler from De Gea. Very tame effort from Benrahma. He trickles it towards a goal. De Gea should do better. He's having a bit of a torrid time this season. And that was the story in a lot of the papers and on the TV and stuff afterwards. Benrahma, I want to talk to you about him, and I'm really interested to hear what you've got to say, because I feel I can rarely remember a player who polarises West Ham fans so much. It doesn't seem to be any grey area with him. We've got fans who, listen to this podcast will know where I sit. I find him really frustrating to watch. He's clearly a talented footballer and skillful, but I find him far too wasteful. The amount of times, and I sort of see it into my memory, he gets it in that left-hand channel, cuts inside around sort of the area of the corner of the penalty box, and then goes to bend a cross in and bends it well beyond the far post straight out for a goal kick. It just does my head in. It's one of them, right? When you've sort of got an idea of a player already, you're then ultra hyper aware of what he does. But you've got some West Ham fans, Tony, who have already saying he's a shoo-in for Hammer of the Year this year. I want him to start every single game. And I talk to anyone, not just sort of those in the media or podcasters or YouTubers or anything like that. I just mean, for sort of normal fans. I chat to my dad about it and his mates who, don't even know what Twitter is, let alone go on social media. All match-going fans. And it's really interesting, incredible to me how much it splits fans down the middle. No one seems to go, oh, he's all right. Everyone either seems to love him or hate him. I'm just really interested to hear what you think about him, because he's been at the club a long time now. We paid 25 million for him. He was supposed to show real promise, and we were going to hope he was going to kick on. And people in that position where we've had Payet there the last few years, and Manuel Lanzini at his peak was outstanding. We've got Jared Bowen on the other side, Fornals, who's well liked. I'm just really interested to see your thoughts on him and where you feel he fits in West Ham's team now and going forward, perhaps.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think I'm right in saying he hasn't completed 90 minutes this season. So I was told the other day. Now, whether that is true or not, you'll have to do the stats, Will, and check it out. I think he, either is on the bench or when he does play, invariably, he gets substituted. So I feel for him from that point of view, because there's nothing worse than playing a game of football, knowing full well that your manager's going to take you off before the game's even finished,
Yeah.
So I'm fully in the Benrahma camp. I think I like creative midfield players. I think it's so easy to go on the field of play and destroy and break up play and pass the ball 10 yards. That's easy to do as a midfielder. What's hard to do as a midfielder is to get on the ball, make things happen, beat players, and get crosses in and score goals. And I get where you're coming from. There are times when his crossing can be a bit wayward, and that there are games where perhaps he doesn't sort of stand out in the games as much as you would like. But No, I like Benny. I think he's exciting to watch. I think he makes things happen. And for me, if I was picking the team, not that I ever will be picking the team, but, I'd like to have Benny in there. I'd put him on the left-hand side where he plays. You've got Jared on the right. I think you've got a nice balance. And, for me, he must be in the running for Ham of the Year. I mean, let's be honest, there ain't many contestants in the race this year, is there? I mean, try and name a player that's been outstanding. That's been death. We all know that. But in terms of other players, there's so many players, which is why we've been where we've been. So many players have struggled with form that, it's hard to pick someone out, even say, well, he's just done that little bit extra in that. Beyond Declan, beyond Ben Rama, I'm genuinely struggling to sort of think of anyone that's consistently been that good. And when you say consistently, Deck probably hasn't played as well as he did last season, and Benny's had his moments, as I've just said to you. So I think it will be a tough choice for the fans come the end of the season.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I've just checked it out. Said Benrahma, he's played all but 2 of the Premier League games this season. Wolves and Fulham, he was on the bench for the entire game for. That was in, when was that? October. We won both of those games, but other than that, he's played 90 minutes 9 times this season.
Yeah, information.
And honestly, I'm looking at them through here now. The majority of those games he's played 90 minutes in the Premier League this season, we've won one of them.
Yeah.
And, it's just really interesting to hear what your
sort of opinions, isn't it? You get, you fans go to the game. Some fans would like the fact that he tries to make things happen, like myself. Other fans, if he gives the ball away, you straight away get off on someone. So it's all opinions and that. But for me personally, I would always like to see Ben Rama in the team.
So if he gets, just quickly then, yes or no, if we get to the Conference League final, which we're all hoping for, and every single player's fit, you're having Ben Rama in the starting lineup?
Absolutely.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, look, really interesting to hear your thoughts on that. Tony, great win against Manchester United. I want to move on swiftly. We've got... And look, Tony, we've haven't got loads of time left, but a really exciting period for West Ham coming up. We've got the semi-final on Thursday, first of all. Hopefully a final in Prague. Beyond that, just talk a little bit briefly about what that will mean for West Ham to get to a final and then potentially to win a European competition.
Well, I think it'll be a major achievement. We all know the Premier League form's been disappointing. I'll be kind here. It's been disappointing this year, hasn't it? After the last 2 seasons. But I keep saying, and for the younger ones out there, you look relatively young. I don't know how old you are, Will, but for the younger ones,
I appreciate that, 31. But yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, but you're one of the younger sort of generation. You're a generation below me, Will. And the point I keep saying to everyone, this has been a normal West Ham season, and I know that's not what I want. It's not what you want. It's not what the fans want. I understand that, but this has been a normal West Ham season, and the disappointment comes because we overachieved. We finished 6th, we finished 7th, semi-final of the Europa League. That was overachieving for West Ham historically. Now, this season, fighting relegation or flirting with relegation, whatever you want to say, and then having a good cup run, that is a normal West Ham season. That's not what I want going forward. Going forward, I want us to build on the success there and the foundations that hopefully David Moyes is putting in place. But this season, if we can win the Conference League, big if, because it's going to be tough. AZ will be a tough game. I don't know a lot about them, but all I do know is if we turn up and we play as well as we can, and like what we did against United, and in some of the other games recently, we can go through to the final. If we get through to the final, you've got to fancy us a one-off game to go on and win the Cup. If you win the Conference League, you're in the Europa League. Yeah, everyone keeps telling me what great seasons teams are having, but if you finish 5th or 6th, you get in the Europa League. So
exactly,
if we'd have finished 5th in the league, we're still only going to get in the Europa League. You're not going to
the same prize, isn't it? The same prize,
exactly. And the great thing about it, and what I'm really pleased about, and what I've enjoyed, Will, is the fans have had the enjoyment of playing in Europe, to go to different countries, to have that togetherness, that bond you have when you go abroad. The home games have been great. There's always been a good atmosphere. The atmosphere, I thought it was brilliant against Man United the other night. What, God knows what it'll be like the semi-final. The fans will be right up for it. I'm looking forward to going to the second leg. And that's what football's all about. Of course, we want to, going forward, I don't want West Ham fighting relegation. It's going to happen every now and again. We know that. But West Ham need to be pushing into the top 10. West Ham need to be playing in Europe, and West Ham need to be competing in cup competitions. That's what we want as a club. So, I think win the Conference League, and then everyone should sit down, take a deep breath, and see exactly where we are with it. And, I include David Moyes in that because, it's important that David wants to continue in his job. It's important that the board want him to continue. It's important that the fans want him to continue. And there's a big argument of winning the Conference League. He deserves that opportunity for, if he gets us back into the Europa League. Everyone said how great he was to finish 6th to qualify for the Europa League. Well, if you win the cup, you've done exactly the same as finishing 6th.
I couldn't agree more. I honestly couldn't agree more. I've been saying that all along. People were so quick, not just West Ham fans, but fans of other clubs, are so quick to sneer at and diminish the Conference League. And I just don't get it. I'm like, all of the mundane average years we had.
Well, we just the point being sown, isn't it? And then if you get into the Europa League, we all want to see bigger and better players at the club. And if you win the Conference League, you get in the Europa League, you're then going to attract better players anyway. And, we're going to have a summer. It's going to be, as I said, an interesting summer. There's going to be a lot of players leaving, in my opinion, and there'll be players arriving. If we're in the Europa League next year, it's going to be a lot easier to attract players than if you don't win the Conference League. All right, people say, well, it's the third competition and that. Well, let's not forget.
It's better than no competition, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the Cup Winners' Cup, which we won in 1965, that was the third competition as well, because you had the European Cup, you had the UEFA Cup, and then you had the Cup Winners' Cup. So that was still the third competition. And when we won that, no one was moaning in. It was all, well, fantastic. We won the Cup, we won the Cup Winners' Cup. All right, we haven't won a competition to get in it, but we worked our socks off last season to finish 7th. I know we should have finished a little bit higher. We fell away at the end. I get that. But we still qualified for Europe for our league position. And again, put in perspective, West Ham have never, ever, ever in their history qualified for Europe 2 seasons running through their league position. And we've been going for, 128 years now. So that tells you everything about how consistent and how good the team had been. And yeah, there's been a dip in the Premier League form. We know that. But I think it's important that people and fans on the social media, yeah, of course, it's great to get involved, to do the podcast, to go on Twitter and have Instagram, have all your opinions and everything. But we can't get too carried away. You can't get too carried away in football if you start winning and doing really well. You then can't be disrespectful to the other teams. But if you're doing, on the other hand, you're not doing particularly well, then you can't get too down about it because there's enough quality at the football club to eventually turn it round, which is what's happened. So my advice to all the Hammers out there is to, of course, enjoy all your social stuff and everything, but let's not forget we're in the middle of a cup run. Hopefully we're going to win the Conference League and then we'll qualify for the Europa League and then sit down in the summer. Everyone can bang their heads together and then work out the plan and the way forward for the club.
Definitely, just deep breaths and go again. And
Absolutely.
Totally, I was sort of hoping you'd agree with me on the side Ben Rama thing, which you didn't. That would have been vindication indeed. But what you say there, you might take the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I think. I find it really difficult that fans, who've watched West Ham for as long or if not longer than I have, these are like the best seasons I've ever had. I absolutely love it. I've been watching since sort of the mid to late 90s. And yeah, I've just, been season ticket holder for all the dross as well. So, even if we end up coming 13th, but we get to European final, this would be one of the greatest seasons ever. But
I'd go further than that. I said I don't care if we stay up 17th on goal difference. I don't care. I really don't care if we win the Conference League. I'm not one of these. A couple of people said, I don't mind getting relegated if we win the Conference. I don't want to get relegated. That's not an achievement in any shape or form with the current squad we got. But stay in the Premier League, and we've given ourselves a really good chance. Even if it's 17th, who cares? Win the Conference League, happy days. Day out in Prague, great time. Win a cup, play in the Europa League next year. Brilliant.
Tony, honestly, I couldn't agree with you more about all that. I think for most West Ham fans, Sam Allardyce coming back in the Premier League with Leeds, just triggered me to watching, West Ham under Sam in the Prem. And, I just think to compare all of those years that we all of us had, some great years under Slaven Bilic, under Alan Pardew, and as far back as Harry Redknapp, and even Glenn Roeder got us to 7th in his first season. There have been good times at West Ham, but they've been seasons, individual seasons in amongst lots of sort of averageness. So I think this current era, you never know where the club's going to go. I do always stress that West Ham fans, all of us, were promised football like this. There was an implicit promise when we were ripped away from our spiritual home against all of our wills. No one took a vote. None of us had a choice. When that happened, to go to the London Stadium, the implicit understanding and promise from the board was, we'll do this, but in return for taking you away from the place where you and all your generation of your family have watched football for, absolutely decades, nearly 100 years or whatever, in return, you will see the football team who walk out in the claret and blue that you support every week will be better. That was the understanding. That's why there was so much anger the first few seasons, and some of the scenes we saw. The Burnley game is obviously when it all culminated, but for a long time it was an angry, not very nice feeling around West Ham when we moved into that stadium. The last couple of seasons have genuinely, for a lot of fans, I think, feel finally they go, okay, we're getting what we were promised in that deal. And
the thing is, Will, is it that you talk about? I agree with what you said, but it takes time, and also thing as well is you need to have winning football. You need to be progressing on the field of play. If you're losing 3-0 under Burnley and you're in a relegation fight, of course you're going to have discontented people. But the last three seasons, 6th and 7th semi-final last year. All right, it's not been pretty this year, but semi-final this year, there has been progress made. You can argue that there's been a lot of money spent on the squad. Not all of it's been wisely spent, but there's been a lot of money spent. We've got some good players at the club now, so slowly it's moving in the right direction. And you're right, that was the promise of the ball. If you come to the London Stadium, things will improve, things will get better in that. And I always say, I do the stadium tours, and I always say about the atmosphere. What is an atmosphere? Is it the ground or is it the fans?
Of course, it's just the fans.
It's the fans. It always has been, always will be. In other words, you'll get a good atmosphere at the Bone Inn, but you'll also get a good atmosphere at the London Stadium if, and it's a big if they're seeing good football, getting results, winning games and winning trophies. If you get that, of course you'll get a good atmosphere. So it's very, very slowly moving in the right direction, and hopefully next season we can do better in the Premier League, hopefully be in the Europa League, and everyone's going to be happy.
Yeah, totally. Well, look, Tony, we've sort of skirted around the issue, the two of us, so far in the podcast. The David Moyes question is another one that split fans this season. I think at different times there's been, a widespread, it's fair to say, clamour, not just the ones we've mentioned. Obviously you see certain accounts and voices on social media who are sort of popular off the back of their sort of, general loudmouthness or shoutiness or whatever it might be. But even at times there was some more sort of, calmer-minded fans, not necessarily on social media. The ones I was talking about earlier, colleagues of mine who are just fairly reasonable people who had just sort of had enough. Me and Jonesy only once this season on the podcast after the Wolves defeat in January did we say, okay, finally a change might be in order. But other than that, in 2023, it's been brilliant. West Ham have won 6 and lost 7 games in the Premier League since January the 1st, 2023, which is the exact same amount as post-January last year when we came 7th. I know the beginning of the season changed it, but 2023 has actually been okay results-wise. The couple of hammerings by Brighton and Newcastle maybe warped that slightly. But the David Moyes question, what have you made of it this season? Were there any times where you felt a change in order? What do you feel going forward in the summer and then beyond that?
Well, I've always been pro David Moyes. I think I've always made that pretty clear. I've always said to anyone who's been moaning about it this season, and yeah, of course they've had reason to moan, and I get that, and I know David Moyes gets that, but you've got to be careful what you wish for sometimes. It's all right getting rid of David Moyes. Who on earth takes over as manager of West Ham? People will throw lots of names around and everything. You've got Brendan Rodgers, probably would be a good appointment. You've got Michael Carrick, who certainly would be a good appointment in terms of if you're going to go down the youth route. But beyond that, there's not going to be 10, 12 candidates to choose from. You're going to be restricted. And the question is, are they going to do better than what David Moyes is doing? And again, that's, you mentioned about Ben Rama, or about, sort of bit of black and white with Ben Rama. It's probably the same with David Moyes. I think a lot of people appreciate what he's done for the club. 6th, 7th, hopefully going to win the cup this year. If he does that, it's a wonderful achievement, I think if let's put it this way, if West Ham in the Conference League, he deserves to certainly start the season as the manager of West Ham United Football Club, without a doubt, because of what he's done. He brought silverware to the club for the first time in 43 years, and that's coming off the back of 2 successful league seasons. So of course he deserves that chance. If West Ham don't win the cup, then there's probably an argument, as I say, which will happen anyway. Sit down in the summer and work out where the club wants to go, what path is it going down, how do we integrate these wonderful youth players that we've got coming through? What do we do with losing the experienced players? What do we do if we're going to lose Declan Rice, which we all probably accept is going to happen? So there's going to be a lot of change. But as things stand at the moment, I can't really answer the question, Will, because of where we are in the season. It's a hypothetical question that can only really be answered if you ask me on June the 8th, when we've hopefully either won the cup or we're not in the cup final. Then obviously I can answer it a bit better. But as things stand at the moment, I think David Moyes deserves a chance to be manager of West Ham United Football Club next season. Having said that, I think, there are areas where West Ham can improve. There's no doubt about that. Tactically we can improve. Substitution-wise we can improve. Some of the football that we played, it's been good recently, but, some of the football can improve. And certainly the results can improve in the Premier League. So there's a lot of stuff that can be improved and worked on in the summer. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I totally agree. Right, Tony, last one then, really quickly before we let you go. Declan Rice, the question you've mentioned there, seems that sort of everyone seems to be just accepting that he's on the way. He's gone about it pretty professionally. He didn't sign a new deal. What do you make of that situation there? What's a fair valuation, and what do we do to replace him if he does go this summer, assuming you think he's going to?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, I personally, I think Declan will leave. I think his number one choice would have been Chelsea, purely because of his links there as a kid. We all know he came from Chelsea to West Ham, but Chelsea aren't going to be in the Champions League next year, and that's impossible. So I don't think he will sign for Chelsea. He might go to Arsenal if he wants to stay in London. He might go to Manchester United if Man United sign Harry Kane, which I think they're going to have a real go at signing Harry Kane. If you're Declan and you see the England captain going to Manchester United, you might think, I'll let mine be in the team, playing behind him, sort of thing. Declan can go anywhere in the world, Will. He literally, along with Jude Bellingham, he will be one of the most sought after players in the world this summer. There's no doubt about that. Can he play at Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal? Of course he can. We know that. And, I wish Declan all the best and good luck and everything. It's disappointing that he's going to leave West Ham, but this is not a new thing. Where it's been going on for decades, where unfortunately the club hasn't really built on things. I personally think the moment we lost to Frankfurt last season, I think that was the time when we lost Declan, because just to clarify that, I think if you beat Frankfurt, you get in the final, you play Rangers, you should beat Rangers. You can't tell, but if you beat Rangers, you get in the Champions League. You get in the Champions League, you can then say to Deck, right, here you go, Deck, we've given you everything we can, sign the contract. You might then have got him to sign the contract. But I think, of course, when we lost to Frankfurt, I think that really was the final part of Declan sort of making his mind up, really. I mean, in terms of staying, I would say you've probably got 1 or 2% chance of him staying there. The only thing that might sway him is if we win the Conference League. He then thinks we're in the Europa League, European football. I'll give it one more season. He might think that, but I doubt it. I would have thought when Deck goes away with the England boys and listens to them all talking about winning cups and playing in the Champions League and earning 300 or 400.
And I was going to say the £300 a week.
Yeah. But that's no different to it back in the sort of the late 80s when I got in the England squad. My head was turned. I ended up leaving West Ham because of the reasons I've just given for Declan to leave. And until we can get in a position where we can get a winning team that can compete to get in Europe every year, to win trophies, which is in modern day football, that's going to be very, very difficult. We know that. So I think we're going to have to accept that he's going to move on. Wish him all the best. I hope he leaves in the right manner, because that's really important. And you never know, one day, maybe like 10 years' time, but one day he might come back and play for West Ham. And a lot of players have done that, myself included. And I think it's always wise to try and leave on the best possible terms. But yeah, sadly, I'd love to say otherwise, but I don't think Dak will be a West Ham player next year.
Yeah, totally agree. And to be honest, I think he will. I think if he leaves now at the end of the season, he hasn't kicked up a big fuss. I think if West Ham get the money, any sort of 90 million plus, I think it's a reasonable valuation for him. And we can really.
You actually asked, I didn't answer. Will, I reckon 100 million will be what he'll go for. And of course, great, West Ham get 100 million. You've then got to replace him, and you've got to spend the money wisely, which is a completely separate matter.
Exactly. Right, Tony, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on the show. I know you said you're not very good at them, but really quick fire. 2 games this week, on 2 score predictions from you. AZ Alkmaar first, then Brentford, go.
West Ham 2, AZ 0. Brentford 1, West Ham 1, and the point will enable us to stay in the Premier League for next season.
Absolutely love it. Listen, Tony Cottee, West Ham legend, I really appreciate you giving us your time. I know all the listeners will. In place of James Jones. I hate to break it to everyone listening at home, but Jonesy is actually back next week. So you'll have no Tony Cottee. But look, Tony, it's been brilliant having you on. Don't